Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lawman, Reeves, Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, it is officially Bass's first day on, he gets, brought in. And, gets, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Officiated, I guess is the word I'm looking for, as a deputy marshal. And it is exactly what I thought. Donald Sutherland is playing Judge Parker. And it was a really interesting conversation because he's very frank with Bass, where it's like, yeah, initially I was told to give you specifically this job because obviously he knows the language of the indigenous people here. So it's like, right, they'll more likely be less guarded with someone of your complexion. But for him, it's like, yeah, it goes beyond that for me personally. I need someone who's a good shooter, but also has a strong moral backbone, and you have that. But the fact of the matter is, he's like, you take this job and you live it long enough, eventually you'll end up like someone like Cheryl. It will grind you until, like, you lose a little of who you were. And, like, you could go many different ways. You could either die, is that thing of you die the hero, you live long enough to become a villain type of situation. Not the exact words he was using, but it was kind of like this job will eventually kind of corrode your soul a little bit. But Bass promises, like, that's not going to happen. So he takes the job and he wants to help out the guy that he met in the hallway. His name is Myson. I don't know if it was like, because it's spelled like M-Y-S-O-N, so I don't know if it's like supposed to be like Mason or is it just actually pronounced like Myson. But either way, that's sad. He ended up, like, he was starving for food and the guy caught him, and I think it ended up in an altercation and he ended up killing the guy. And Bass wants to help him out because it is that complicated conundrum of, like, right, you want to help him out. He's such a young, probably especially in your eyes, especially considering, like, it wasn't, like, it's been a while, obviously, but it ain't been that long since you were in his shoes. Like, you want to give him the chance, it's like, right, he did what he did, because he's starving, he's trying to get by. Bass having, like, once again, that his circumstances wasn't that long ago. None of their circumstances were that long ago. It only got rectified like 10 years ago of just kind of like, the slave situation being what it was. So it's still fresh enough wounds that, especially for Bass, where it just, it's like, right, you see someone, like, you want to help them, but it's like, even as a lawman, there's not much he can do. Because even Judge Parker was like, yeah, that kid needs a lawyer. And jumping ahead a little bit, just with everything going down in the episode and the story, sadly, he gets found guilty and he will hang. I don't know if there's anything that Bass can do for him. It's just, it is what it is. He did, I think that helps influence a lot of, like, what will happen with Billy, which we'll get to soon enough. But I was like, which that in itself, I'll get to I'll go ahead and talk about it. That was really interesting to me, that was our introduction to Billy. I was like, so you're part of he's kind of working along with, like, was it the Huffmans or something like that? They're band of, no, Underwood, sorry, that's what it is. Because the husband's name is, like, Huff Underwood. It's a gang of people who are, like, and he's part of this operation, this stagecoach robbery situation. So, which I thought was so interesting because I'm like, that's how you and Bass meet, which I'm like, I would assume, and maybe it's an assumption on my part, and maybe once again I'm pulling too much from the Lone Ranger. Once again, I'm not well versed in it, but just a little bit, that I'm like, well, I talked about it previously. This is based on specifically a trilogy of novels, specifically the first two. I think they probably did that because maybe, like, the third novel covers, like, later parts of Bass's life, but maybe it's only, like, up until, like, his time in the later parts of his time in the army, and specifically his time maybe up to, like, at least a chunk of his life as a lawman. So maybe that's why they specifically don't pull anything from the third novel, but it's specifically based on the two novels. But either way, I'm assuming the novel isn't like a full blown historical story, and it's just more historical fiction in that it takes real life people and historical stuff, but you kind of twist and you make tweaks to the narrative to kind of tell the story you want to tell. So it's not like, oh, it's not like magic or anything like that to it, but it's still just kind of like you take these historical figures and these people and you kind of characterize them, and or at least kind of take their story in directions that isn't 100% accurate to history. I'd assume that's kind of what the novel's deal is. Once again, I've not read them, so I can't really speak on that. That's just an assumption on my part. So that because even because I don't, like I said, my only real introduction was the Timeless episode, and it's been a couple years, so I don't remember that as well. So, and I think we got a little bit into their circumstances. That's why I'm like, Billy must be I don't know if that's like his actual one, because I don't remember the character's name in the when it comes to time. It's like, I know Lone Ranger wise, the character's name is like Tonto, but I'm like, because I remember the character getting pissed when Wyatt called him that, because it's like, I think it was like just meant, it was kind of like a derogatory name, just kind of like because he's native and indigenous, so it's just kind of, it's like, yo, don't call me that, you know? So I don't remember the character's actual name. I do remember it's played by Zane McLaren. Either way, I'm going on this whole tangent, but like I said, I just thought that was such an interesting introduction for Bass and Billy, that for their story to kind of start in those circumstances. But obviously he goes out on with a posse man named Garrett, which I was like, why does he look familiar? I was like, is he who I think he is? And he is. It's a actor called Garrett Hedlund, and the thing I knew him from was he plays Mitch in Tulsa King. So I was like, oh, that's pretty dope. But I also didn't notice until I looked in his filmography, I saw Four Brothers. I was like, who are you in Four Brothers? And I looked it up. I was like, wait, you're the younger brother in Four Brothers? That's wild. If you've never seen that movie, it's a movie from 2004. I thought the movie was like a 2003 movie, but you know, I guess it is 2004. I think I remember seeing that in theaters with my mom and one of my sisters. But either way, like he plays like the younger brother of like Mark Wahlberg, Tyrese, and Andre 3000 played like I think his older brothers. I think he played like the baby of the family. I remember that movie. I've seen it maybe twice in total. Either way, I'm going on this whole tangent. I'm sorry, but I was just like, I had no idea that was you way back then. But either way, Garrett seems like a good enough guy, but considering like knowing what the little I know about Bass's story, I was like, this ain't going to work out. It's going to be him and Billy. So I was like, what's going to happen to you, Garrett? Is this just not going to work out, or are you going to die along the way? Like, are you going to be corrupt and Bass going to have to put you down or something? That's what I was kind of worried about. I mean, but he seemed decent enough, especially with him and Bass getting to know each other. He's like looking for the opportunity. He's like, hey, I know this place like the back of my hand. I could help you. I've rode with so many other people as a posse man. I have a family. I have a boy, a girl, got another one on the way. You know, it's like him and Bass kind of talk a little bit, and Bass is like, yeah, depending. I mean, you already knew, because Bass was like, if this goes well, I'll keep you, you know, on a permanent retainer type of situation. He's like, if it all goes well. I was like, yeah, that's going to be the rub of it all. It's not going to. Especially when we find out that our boy Garrett has a gambling issue. So when Bass and him stopped by a hotel, which I thought was interesting too, he was like, H-O-T, and it's like, Bass is like, I can read. Because, you know, making assumptions, because it's like, yeah, you're a black man, I'm assuming you can't read. But it's like, yeah, I'm educated enough to be able to read. But the fact is that Bass had to handle the situation on his own. And a little card game situation, which takes us back to episode 1, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wonder, has Bass played cards since then? I guess he's also kind of gotten good at, like, right, when that's probably your introduction to the game to some extent, you know, the fact of the matter is your master, like, cheating you, that you know how to play the game amongst some crooks when your master himself was a crook, which they have to, like, that's going to have to come back up at some point in time, considering we know that he's in politics at some point in time. Like, him and Bass have to cross paths. We'll see whether that ends up being the case or not, but they have to at some point. But like I said, we'll see if the storyline goes that direction. But either way, I love Bass kind of doing his thing and He's good at bluffing, and he ends up kind of winning the pot and taking all their money. But it's like, hey, I'll give you all your money back, give you all this back for some information. And it's like, yeah, you could go ahead and kill me, but you'll be killing a deputy marshal, and there's a whole squad out there waiting. It's like, oh, you're bluffing. It's like, do you want to take that chance? Oh, the person out there wasn't even a marshal, it was Garrett. So kind of getting our peek into who Bass is as a lawman. That it's like, right, he knows how to play the game. Obviously, like, he's a very reputable person. His earnestness, that's the word I couldn't think of last episode that Cheryl was complimenting him about, the thing that he said would eventually get him killed. And obviously we see that earnestness shine throughout the episode. But we also get a little more time, but not much more time, with Miss Underwood, played by Paula Malcolmson. The thing I best know her for is playing Abby in Ray Donovan, because I saw her at the beginning, I was like, is that who I think it is? And it totally was her. So I doubt this is the last we'll see of her, because the Underwood stuff was never dealt with. It's like touched upon because Billy's the main one they're going after, but like, I guess like the Underwoods can't really be touched right now, because it's like Bass doesn't really go after them. I guess Billy's the one that's got the warrant out for him and stuff. So I even love, like, Garrett was saying, like, oh, maybe I'll get a writ about you and Huff. And she's like, oh yeah, have Judge Parker come here and give it to us himself, and we can he can find him and his noose underneath the wheels of my carriage. I was like, interesting. So I don't know if they're going to be an overarching thing, or whether they'll just be something we see like maybe in the next episode or two. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see what ends up seeing how that plays out. But yeah, they end up catching Billy, and I do like Billy being the way he is. He's a fast talker, trying to say, like, right, the fact of the matter is I'm going to end up dead. Judge Parker, like, I think he said, like, the first time he got his job, when he first became a judge, that day he ended up hanging like 12 people on his first day or something like that. It's like, I'm as good as dead, and if I talk, the Underwood gang is going to find me and kill me. So, but yeah, they're sitting down talking, and once again find out a little bit more about Garrett's like gambling issues, where it's like, hey, he was like, yeah, I had this, like, I think essentially it was like a stove or something that was kind of like, he's like, oh man, that thing was so good that like you could even heat up, the neighbors could feel the heat because it gave off so much. It's, oh, whatever happened to it? He's like, well, I had to sell it with a whole bunch of stuff. He's like, Billy, if you ever make it out of this, you might want to make sure you don't ever get addicted to cards. But then Billy kind of was like, hey, like, I know where all this treasure and jewelry is hidden, like, that the Underwoods, because they couldn't really fence it right now because, they'll avoid suspicion. So it's like, right, I know where it is, give you all of it, you let me go, you'll never see me again. Garrett's chomping at the bit for it. It's like, got family, which, hey, Bass could use it as well, but he's an honest man, and sadly Garrett got picked up with him. And one day Garrett was like, yo, I'm telling. And then they start getting to position of drawing guns. I thought Garrett was in on it too, where it's like, hey, we're drawing guns because we know we're being followed. Because Garrett clocked him when they were leaving, when they were like staring at him. So I thought he was in on it too. But then he didn't realize like what this was about. Because I thought, okay, the moment he was running his mouth, I was like, Bass isn't drawing the gun on you, so you're not in on it. So Bass is trying to protect you. I thought what was going to happen is Bass would shoot the guy that's about to shoot him. Didn't expect Garrett to catch the bullet straight away, straight in the eye. And it's like, damn. I was like, well, that's taken care of. Like, I mean, Bass would have always probably had to deal with the fact that his home dude probably would have been willing to take Billy and find a treasure and screw you over. That would have been a whole thing. But it's like, no, that was immediately nipped in the bud with Garrett getting killed. So, shame. I wonder will that be something that kind of gets handled off screen? Does like Bass end up visiting Garrett's wife and so? I mean, maybe it's too far away and not really in his purview. Maybe, like I said, does that off screen, maybe not on screen. But man, that but then up to Bass on his own to end up putting everyone down. Made sure that last guy didn't get away. So. But even Billy's like, how'd you learn how to shoot like that? He's like, why, that's for, a black man? Is like, no, just in general, how'd you learn to shoot like that? It's like, we'll keep this between us. I'm curious. He's like, just don't run your mouth off about it. I wonder why Bass was so like, I mean, obviously he don't want to talk too much about his circumstances, but I'm wondering, is that why he told Billy not to kind of run his mouth off about it? Just kind of keep this between us, because I wonder, I mean, they know he's good with a gun, but maybe it also has to deal with like, right, people know he's good with a gun, but people probably don't know about his military history. And yeah, despite the slave situation being what it is, I don't know what the records are about him leaving and being like, maybe that's also it. I mean, it's like, right, your past about you running away and you beating up your master Reeves and kind of bouncing, like probably why he probably doesn't talk about, I mean, who knows how much of it's like known about his military history and stuff like that, you know? Maybe Judge Parker knows that, or maybe he doesn't. It's just also like you don't want to advertise a lot of your past in that regard of like, oh, I was part of the army and stuff. And maybe that's just a side of things you also don't want to talk about because of being a black man in the army and what that meant, where it was like you didn't really have much of a choice. You tried to run away, as we saw in the first episode. You caught a bullet in the back. So either way, he brings in Billy, and as he's walking, he sees Myson, and like Myson's like face is beat up, and it's like, I think a lot of that, especially when he tried to talk to Judge Parker, he's like, hey, that Billy kid, he's just confused. And it's like, yeah, he told us where some of that stolen German man's like stolen jewelry was. And he's like, noted. And you can see that look of disappointment in Bass's face, being like, he hopes that's enough to kind of keep Billy from swinging from the ropes. So we'll see. I mean, considering we know what the story is, like, of course it will in the long run, but you know, like I said, I'm curious to see how Bass is able to kind of have that swing, because it's not like he's killed anyone. Yeah, he's robbed people, so it is a little less of an issue, I think, in compared to other crimes. So maybe Bass could swing some stuff in his favor, kind of. We'll see how that all plays out. I'm also curious how much we're going to see Florence, because she was kind of like, oh yeah, like all you need to know about this job is listen to me and you'll never go wrong. So we'll see how much Florence might pop up in the future or not. That might just be a one-on thing, but maybe we'll see her from time to time and see if anything kind of comes about from that. But some complicated circumstances on your first day of the job, and like I said, I think you already kind of feel that twinge of like, you're a lawman, but also like you want to be able to use the law to, you know, help people. You want to do right by people, taking down some bad guys, but you also want to kind of help people who you feel like just need a second chance, because I think he himself was given a second chance as well. So I think maybe that's where that also resonates, where he's, you know, as a lawman, it's like, I want to fight for, and, you know, get justice and do right and be able to take care of my family, but I also want to have a good conscience about it. And there's some people where it's like, they, once again, that earnestness where it's like, I just feel like these people made a mistake and it shouldn't have to fully define them, especially in the Myson case. But I think he also applies that to Billy's circumstances. It's like, yeah, the kid runs his mouth a lot, but, you know, overall it's like, oh, he's a good person. So we'll see how that all ultimately ends up playing out. But on the other side of things, we had Sally secretly meeting with Arthur. No telling how many times that's kind of happened behind. Well, he does. I don't know if they talked beforehand. They did kind of give each other that look last episode. Who knows how much of that is they've secretly been speaking behind Ginny's back and, you know, Baz's back or not. Because obviously she's going to be as she's getting older, she's going to be taking on more responsibilities, helping around the house, especially with the youngest on its way. But also like the other youngins, and it's like you got to teach your amongst her youngest siblings. She has to like get the next one ready. Like, we're going to have to help out. She's going to have to help out with clothes and washing clothes and drying them out and, you know, cooking supper and a lot more responsibilities. And I love that moment with her mom where Ginny like tries to like throw water at her and kind of play with her just to kind of let her know like it isn't all serious. Like, you know, I'm not trying to take away your childhood or anything like that, but it's just like it is the responsibilities of like growing up, but also, you know, I think it's also Ginny's way of being like, yeah, I'm not trying to like bog you down with all this responsibility as well, but I want, because I, you know, just being playful to remind her like I do love you, You know, this ain't like some punishment. And even she talks to Arthur about it, where it's like, oh, your parents must not have you doing a lot of chores, especially now that you're actually working. But for Arthur, it's like he doesn't have a family. He lost his mom a few years ago, and his dad died in the war, which I'm sure on some level Sally probably thinks to herself like that could have easily been her dad. But I thought it was kind of this sweet thing with Arthur where he was like, basically you have people who love you, people to love too. So hold on to that and kind of don't take it for granted. It can be a lot, having to like wrangle in your siblings and stuff, but having that is a beautiful thing and don't take it for granted. And I think that's kind of a neat thing. And obviously we didn't see it in the episode, but obviously we saw kind of like, the youngest is coming, and so by the time Bass gets back home, number 5 came into the world, and it's this beautiful moment of him asking Jenny if she's okay, after everything's all said and done, and she's like, yeah, are you? He's like, I am now, being able to come home to them, it's like, yeah, the lawman job being what it is, it's just like the soldier situation. There's no guarantee you'd be able to come home. You hope and pray that you're able to come home, but, he saw Garrett's story end today. He also saw Myson's situation being what it is, and maybe Billy's situation might be following suit, but I think it is a thing of all you can do is thank your lucky stars, to just be able to come home. So I think that's just kind of a beautiful way to kind of end off the episode in that regard. So I'm excited to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good